We are here today with Hannah Carr. Hannah is a naturopath nutritionist who specializes in helping women overcome the symptoms of anxiety naturally using 5 holistic tools. And she's going to share with us some of the easy and enjoyable ways that we can find balance again. So such a exciting and valuable conversation for what I know so many women are going through. And thank you for joining us today, Hannah.
Thank you. First of all, it's such an honor to be here. So thank you for holding space for this. And yeah, I loved your words there, like easy. We all love that word, easy, and enjoyable. And I think that's the thing with health, is a lot of the time we can think that it's always hard work and I must be doing this. And I don't know about you, Courtney, but I've really found it's the things that are easy, enjoyable, that you want to stick to and that you keep doing.
Definitely.
And so this is what we need to lean towards. What is easy? What is enjoyable? Let's be doing more of that.
Absolutely. So many of us already have a lot on our plates. And so when we think about trying to add in more, it can quickly become overwhelming. So I love that you focus on the easy and enjoyable things. So it's easy to do and something that we want to do. We're not forcing ourselves to try and do something just because it's good for us, but
yes,
we actually want to do it and are interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So you work with women who are experiencing anxiety. How does the anxiety show up for these women? What kind of problems do they have in their everyday life?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because when I first started doing this work, my health problems, so a lot of health practitioners you'll find had their own health challenges, right? And part of mine was constant fatigue, feeling like I was falling asleep even in the middle of the day. And I used to say stress and overwhelm. But as time's gone on, I've kind of realized I had anxiety myself, but didn't label it as that. And sometimes we don't want that label. And other times we just don't know where what our symptoms fall under, what label our symptoms fall under. So it's a really good question. And for many women, I would actually say that they've got high functioning anxiety, which is kind of like the swan, where you look like you're gliding along in life and everything looks okay to everyone else. But, you know, at the bottom, your legs are furiously pedaling. But really for you, it's like you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed and full with worry all of the time. And maybe it holds you back in your life. So maybe you have social anxiety, especially after what's been going on in the world for the past 18 months. And you're worried about those social interactions and how to get back out there in the world again. It might be that you have health anxiety. So a lot of women I work with, we Google symptoms, don't we? Like, I've got heart palpitations, and then you're diagnosing yourself that you've got a heart problem, whereas in fact, maybe it's just the symptoms of anxiety. So some of the other common symptoms I would say, and I'm sure lots of your ladies and gents, if you've got gents in your group, will be familiar with this, but is that feeling of being tired but wired. So I'm really tired, I need to go to bed. And then when you get to bed, your mind is so busy that it just keeps you awake for hours and hours. So that's some of my ladies, but others wake up at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and then can't get back to sleep again. So that's a huge symptom of anxiety. And I would also say, I mentioned palpitations, breathlessness is another one, panic attacks, which I'm sure people are aware of, but also lots of digestive issues. So, when we're worried about maybe these social interactions, like I mentioned, and it might give us like a bit of loose bowels, a little bit of diarrhea, perhaps, some stomach cramps, that kind of thing. So there's lots of kind of, I would almost say, everyday symptoms that you may not label as anxiety, but behind that is this constant worry inside that other people might not recognize.
That's such a good point, especially with your swan analogy too, because for people who are experiencing anxiety, there's a lot going on inside that people around you might not realize or even know that you would be struggling with.
Yes.
Outside looks calm and peaceful. And then, like you said, underneath you're pedaling so hard, trying to keep up. And there's so much motion and movement happening together that you're constantly going. And so it could be hard for people around you to accept that you might be struggling with anxiety. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, like I said, you may not want to put that label on yourself, but then someone else being really surprised that that's what you suffer with because they just didn't know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And, in our culture historically, there's been a bit of a stigma around putting these labels on ourselves. Sometimes it's that we don't want to be attached to a particular feeling that we have about what that label means. But again, it's that social aspect too, about what other people are going to think of us. And, maybe they'll think that we're not good enough if we can't keep up with life and all the
Yes.
demands and responsibilities that we have. So
Yeah.
do you find that there's a bit of an emotional part to accepting that someone's struggling with anxiety?
Yeah, I think it's about normalizing it. So when I talk about it a lot, then people will then say yes, like they're recognize they've got it, and they're willing to admit it to themselves and to others. But I completely get your point, Courtney. Mental health wasn't talked about. It's only been really probably in the last decade where people have spoken about it openly, because before you may have kind of been thrown away and locked up and thrown away the key kind of thing if you were suffering from real mental health challenges. So it's really only been normalized for those 10 years. So yeah, I think that us having, not just us, but people in the space having these open conversations, and you just chatting to your friends and normalizing it as much as possible, allows us to accept it. And when we've accepted something, we was actually having a discussion last weekend about labels, and one party was saying labels are not helpful, and another party, me namely, was saying sometimes labels can be helpful, because if you know what's going on, you can start to look for a solution. Otherwise, we might convince ourselves that, oh, this is just me. This is in my nature. My mum was a worrier and I'm a worrier. And all my family have had digestive problems. Like, we've all had loose bowels, and that's just our family. But we don't have to accept these things. But the first thing is, finding out what actually is going on for you before we can start to look for that solution.
Yes, I've been talking about this recently too, actually, about how once you know what your starting point is, whether it's a
Yes.
diagnosis or just coming to terms with how you are actually feeling and really getting clear on what your truth is, then you have that point to move forward from. But if you're fighting against it or even not clear on what that is, you don't have that starting point. It's like trying to take a road trip without even knowing, like, you are here. Where are you starting from? And then where do you want to go?
Yeah, I was kind of giving this good example of my son a couple of years ago was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I was explaining to, people was having this conversation with, I said, if he didn't find that out, he would have forever thought he was stupid. He can't read, he can't spell, he struggles with writing. But once he knew what it was that was going on, you're just able to say, that's one tiny part of me, and I just need a little bit more time or a little bit more support, and I can get there. I can then get there with the right support. So I think, yeah, absolutely, is whether it's a formal diagnosis or perhaps a self-diagnosis, like the example that I gave myself. I look back and said, oh yeah, I did have anxiety in the past. It might just be that self-diagnosis, and then you can reach out for the help.
Definitely. So once someone has come to terms with their experience of anxiety, whether it's that high functioning anxiety or social anxiety or
Yeah.
more even generalized anxiety, are there specific tools for each type, or what would be kind of a starting point for someone to get started with addressing their anxiety?
Such a good, juicy question. I love that one. Thank you.
Kind of a two-parter too, so
Yeah.
feel free to break it apart.
So I think most people, and I think this is a lot of health conditions, unless you've had one before, or I say disease, like dis-ease in the body, is we wait too long until it becomes too painful, or we can't live with it anymore, and we reach out normally to the only place that we know that can help us, which is usually our doctor. We say GP in the UK. What do you say?
Yeah, general practitioner.
Yeah, your GP.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So you reach out to the GP, and the GP can be really, really helpful. My personal opinion with medication is that it can really be a bridging gap. So in the short term, if we're really in a dire situation, it can give us a little bit of breathing space. But for a lot of conditions, it doesn't give us a long-term solution. We may stay on the medication long-term, but really we're just kind of papering over what's really happening, and we're not actually getting to the root cause. So with anxiety, for example, if you was to go on antidepressants, you probably would need to stay on them, and it would be hard to come off the antidepressants unless you was changing your life in some other way. And so what I would say is, if you feel like you've got a few mild symptoms, perhaps some of the ones that I've spoken about today, like insomnia, like this constant worry, like palpitations, you may not need to go on medication as a first port of call. You would need to discuss it with your doctor, and obviously you'd need to come to your own opinion about that. But you may be able to try some lovely holistic tools first, which I'll run through some of them with you in a moment. But also, if you're on a place that you're on medication, so lots of my ladies come to me and they're on medication, they actually want to come off because it might have caused other symptoms that they're not happy with. Right. So they might want to be reduced in their dose. Well, what my clients have kind of told me is they've tried to come off medication in the past and it didn't work. They ended back up on it. And once they actually start to give their body what it really needs, then they're able to say, I can see why it didn't work last time. I didn't put anything in place that my body actually needed. And this might be really simple things like the right kind of nutrition. You may be eating foods that is making your anxiety worse all of the time. So simple examples of that may be things like coffee, alcohol, sugar. Okay, so they really stimulate the nervous system, but you're feeling anxious, so you keep leaning on those foods, but it's kind of keeping you in that loop all of the time. So it may be as simple as you're able to reduce, one of those, let's not say all at the same time, but your coffee, your coffee, you may be able to, recognize I'm having 5 a day at the moment. It's probably not a healthy place for me. And perhaps just bring it down to say 3 a day. And then at the same time, put another healthy habit in place. And this is a lot of the self-care stuff that I know that you talk about, Courtney, as well, which is movement, but that is not causing stress on the body. So I don't mean HIIT training, I don't mean running, I don't mean I'm trying to remember the other one where they lift all the weights. I've done it in the past, I've tried all of it in the past. What that does is it puts more stress on the body and it keeps the nervous system overstimulated. So the kind of exercise that's going to move your body but allow your nervous system to calm down. So like a walk in nature, perhaps, or a gentle yoga class. So we were chatting yesterday, wasn't we, about yin and just slowing down kind of yoga. Perhaps Pilates if it wasn't pushing you too hard, or Qigong is another really lovely one to actually slow the body down. So yeah, I think my answer to your question is I don't think there's different answers for different types of anxiety, but if your anxiety doesn't feel overwhelming and you feel like you can take the first steps yourself, some of these natural tools you could start to bring in, see if it starts to make a difference for you. But like I say, everyone's individual. So you may need to have some medication in the short term, work with your doctor on that, but also start changing your diet and lifestyle in the meantime to support your body with what it really needs.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned how lifestyle factors can work with medication to help overcome the feelings of anxiety. And I think sometimes we might rely on medication to do all of the work for us and kind of forget about or put aside some of those lifestyle factors.
Yes.
There are those simple things that we can do that don't take a lot of extra time in our day. Like you said, even a short walk or swapping out a couple cups of coffee for maybe a little more water. Those types of things can start to have an impact and work together with medication if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your group, do you ever talk about breath work at all?
We do, yes.
Have you done breath work?
Yeah.
Have you done breath work with your group?
For managing stress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that one of your go-to tools as well?
Yeah, so it's one of our 5 natural tools. Do you know what? There's so many tools, so many natural tools. When I say 5 natural tools, they're the ones that have worked for us and our community, the ones that we mentioned at the beginning that are kind of simple, enjoyable. And I just wanted to bring a little bit of awareness to breath work. And it sounds like your community already know, and just an encouragement really to use it and get in the habit of using it, not necessarily when you need it, but every day. So we're calming the nervous system down, so we're not going to get as overwhelmed or as stressed or have as much anxiety. But also we may remember to use it in the moment if we start to build it into our everyday life. And one of my favorite ones is just the exhalation is longer than the inhalation. So as an example, you may breathe in for the count of 3 and breathe out for the count of 6. and having a trigger for that. So what is your trigger to remember your breath work? And mine is often when I get in the car, I leave a little bit late and I'm in a bit of a rush. So I can feel my stress kind of in my tummy of, am I going to be on time? And as I put my hands on that steering wheel, it's that reminder of, okay, like a deep breath in for 3 and a deep breath out for 6. And it can change things so quickly. I'd love to hear your experience of that, Courtney.
Yes. Oh, I've noticed that as well in my own life, using breath work to regulate my stress levels, even regulate my thoughts and emotions too.
Yeah.
And I love the one that you mentioned with taking just a little bit longer exhale. I often like to do and recommend a balanced breathing practice, working on making the inhale and exhale about equal length. I usually go for a count of 4.
Yeah.
But it could be adjusted to a 3 count or 5, just depending on the person. And that one, I like to say it's like drinking water. Like it's good for your energy at any time, whether you need that energy boost to feel a little bit more awake and alert, or if you're really dragging and feeling kind of, no, the opposite rather. You have high energy and you need to come down a little bit and regulate that way. It can balance you in that way too. So
yeah,
that's one of my favorite go-to breathing practices.
Yeah, it's this involuntary reaction that we have in the body, but we can bring consciousness to it, can't we? And when we bring consciousness to it, we can improve it, like we can, I guess, most things in life, right? Once we bring consciousness and awareness to it. So it's just, I always think with breath work, it's free, it's simple, anyone can do it. You can do it anywhere. You could do it with someone watching you, or just go to the bathroom if you need to. So someone doesn't need to watch you there. And something that's really good to use to get you out of your head, if you've got a lot of worry going on, particularly at night time, and your thoughts are keeping you awake, bringing your consciousness to your breath is giving you something else to focus on other than kind of what's going on up there in your mind.
Yes, definitely. And I know that certainly happens when we try to go to sleep. That's when our mind wants to think about all the millions of things we have to worry about and rehash what happened that day. So I like that idea about focusing on your breathing at that time so you can feel your body breathing. And I do encourage that with my clients too, really trying to feel what your breath feels like, because as we breathe, our body's moving and changing all throughout the process of inhaling and exhaling. And so paying attention to those changes and how our breath is moving and feeling gives us all of those things to focus on, where we move away from our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. And I like what you said too about creating a little bit of a positive trigger for yourself to bring these practices into your day. If, like you said, you have that time when your stress levels often get really elevated, trying to create that new habit. And I often encourage people to check in with themselves around meal times too, because we're going to eat during the day, right?
Yes.
So sometimes that's a good moment to just check in and think about, how am I doing? And how's my day going? What's affecting me? What's bothering me? And what kind of care do I need? So that we can get really conscious around how we are actually doing and check in with ourselves to see what we need to adjust and maybe bring in a little bit more care or support, or use some of these tools during our day to regulate a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a point in our day where we can still rush, like not take that pause before we eat, and then we're eating in a rush, which is affecting our digestion, which affects our absorption as well. So how many minerals and vitamins we're actually absorbing, and just that pause just before, I guess we can just enjoy the meal more as well, can't we, when we're more present?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a whole practice around mindfulness of eating and really starting to be in tune with the tastes, the textures, the flavors, and bringing this presence into actually how we eat is another way to slow down and step away from the worrisome thoughts that might be happening in our mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good point you brought up about the connection between our diet and anxiety, and even the way we eat. If we're eating too quickly, do you have any more kind of thoughts or tips around diet and digestion with anxiety?
Yeah, I can say you know, without a shadow of a doubt, that what we are eating, you've probably heard this one before, and I'm sure everyone in your group has. Oh, sorry, I come forward because they're like, our gut and our mind are so interconnected, and if our gut's not happy, our mind is not happy. And I've had first-hand experience of this. Once you start playing about with diet a little bit, so for some people it might be that they took out gluten, for example, and then they've not had it. I remember one lady that I worked with, she'd not had it for about 6 weeks. And as soon as she had it, for her, that was her thing. When it came back in, she said for the next few days, she just described herself as feeling a bit blue, a bit down, a little bit depressed, and said, before I took that out of my diet, I never realized what an impact it had on me. So I think for lots of us, we're just eating the same kind of foods again and again and again, and we don't really realize the impact that it is having on our gut health or our mental health. So much change. And it might be that maybe diet's a stress point for you, and that's something that's hard to change. And that's why it's nice that there's so many different tools. But for lots of people that are busy, you know, it might be that they're able to change, for example, just their breakfast quite easily. Or like you mentioned, drinking water earlier, that they're just able to have bring a little bit more cleaner water into their diet, into their drinks every day. And those things can have such a massive impact on mental health. I would say that for me, when I first started off on my health journey, nutrition was the thing that changed everything for me, and a noticeable difference within a matter of days. And of course, healing takes a lot longer than that. Healing can take many years in total. But we need something that will get us started. And for me, it was nutrition, and just starting to become aware of how different foods make me feel. I remember one particular retreat I went on, and they said, write down 5 foods that make you feel bad. And I thought, oh, well, that's easy. Roast dinner, because I feel like falling asleep after I've had it. Coffee, because I get the jitters after it. Alcohol, because I get a hangover, and so on and so on. And then they said, and now write down 5 foods that make you feel amazing. And my pen kind of just stopped at that point. And I thought, I don't actually know any foods that make me feel good. I just know the ones that I like that actually make me feel bad, but are keeping me stuck in this cycle of being unhealthy. And so it's been a real learning to find out what foods made me feel good. And I'll give you one of them. I'm a big fan of chia seeds. And I like to say, chia makes you cheerful.
I love that. Yeah.
So it affects the mental health, because it's giving us protein, but also lots of fats, which are very, very supportive for the brain. Yeah. So anyone who's watching this, I'd encourage you to think about what foods make you feel good. And if you don't know, just like I did, tuning into that over perhaps the rest of this month, the rest of this week, whatever works for you, and working out, you know, perhaps it's after a fruit salad that you always feel good, or maybe let's think of some other ones. There's some really weird and wonderful shots that I've taken over the time. Some of you may have tried ginger shots or turmeric shots, and I tried a wheatgrass shot, and it just made me feel so alive because it was giving me so much energy. So finding out these foods that really light us up. And if it's hard for you to take things out, we call it crowding out, which is when we put so much good stuff in that you're not actually noticing that you're missing the bad stuff. So a quick example of that is I work with something called ceremonial grade cacao, which cacao is chocolate, and it's very, very high quality chocolate, very bitter. So normally you need to add a bit of sweetener to it. And that I adore, and it makes me feel good. And so if I have a cacao, I don't miss my coffee. So that would be an example of crowding out. I'm not trying to give up coffee. I'm just trying to have more cacao, which I love. So yeah, introducing more, find out the foods that make you feel good and trying to introduce them more, because then again, we're going back to ease and enjoyment, and it's a more in flow state, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. That's such a good perspective about adding more of what you love.
Yes.
To make it easier to take out the things that aren't making you feel good. Because sometimes the things that aren't making you feel good, we still have a little bit of mental attachment to it.
Oh, we do.
It is coffee, or, you know, chocolate. Having dessert after our dinner with our family, and there's that connection of being together and everybody has it together. It's hard to say no. So we don't want to take away those moments of goodness, but we just want to add in more of the good stuff, and that helps you miss the not as good stuff less and less.
Yeah, and when you do that, when you crowd out and you have all these good foods, you then notice you'll go to a party and someone will say like, oh, I bought banoffee pie as an example, and you'll have it. And then afterwards, you'll feel really bad. You'll feel bad in yourself. You might feel bloated. You might have a sugar crash. Whatever it is for you, you might have a little bit of acid reflux. Maybe it will give you loose bowels if dairy doesn't suit you. But you didn't really notice that before because you felt like that a lot. So when it comes back in, you think, that didn't make me feel good, and you'll make that easy choice then of, I don't want to have that again. And that's not to say ever. Often it's just until the next time, and then it's another reminder of, oh yes, I remember.
Right.
I mustn't have that. But next time maybe I'll make a healthier version of that banoffee pie if that's your thing, and I'll take it to the party with me and offer it as my offering as a gift to everyone. And then they can choose if they want to have the standard normal one, or they can choose if they want to try this healthier one with me. And a lot of people will be really open to it and really grateful that someone else is taking time and effort around the diet and providing lovely food.
That's a great approach, because social gatherings can be really tough with food choices, and often there can be a limited amount of things there. So making a healthy version of something you want to have is a nice way to satisfy that for yourself, and then still contribute and bring your offering for others to share too.
Yeah, and the reason I know that is I've got it so wrong over the years, Courtney. It's so wrong. And this is all part of the process of changing and learning and growing. But I've been to I was a bridesmaid once, and the hens kept getting together and planning everything, and I said, no, I'm not going to eat. So they all sat around a table and all ate, and I literally sat on a different sofa and didn't join in at all. And when I left, I thought, wow, that didn't really work out. How could I do better next time? Right. So it's just a learning.
Absolutely. That's all part of the process and the journey. And, I'm so glad we touched on this part about gut health and anxiety, because it really speaks to the mind and body connection that is present in all of us. But I think when we are so busy, we are caught up in a lot of our external world, we start to tune out what's going on inside. And so when we listen to those messages that our body's giving us, whether it's how foods are affecting us or how our stress and anxiety are coming up in certain key moments where we can find some patterns there, we can start to find those things to adjust and reduce our anxiety overall.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of symptoms that the gut isn't happy. And I just mentioned a few of them now. I mentioned the acid reflux, or maybe even silent reflux, or a lot of burping, passing wind, diarrhea, constipation, constant bloating. All of those things, we mark them off as normal. Everyone does that, but it's not true. A healthy body, maybe occasionally if you eat something, that might happen, but generally that shouldn't be something that's happening on a daily basis. We want to be comfortable there. And for me, these are all warning signs. In fact, all dis-ease for me is a warning sign. So even anxiety itself, or any health condition that you might have, for me now, I'm always looking at what is the message behind this. So for anxiety, it might be that you're too busy, you've not processed past trauma. And I know you do a lot of this emotional work, Courtney. So it might be the body is trying to communicate this with you. It may be, for example, that there is a certain food, maybe you have got a food intolerance and you've never got to the bottom of that. And again, your body's just trying to give you feedback. It can't talk to you verbally normally, so it talks to us in the way of signs and symptoms, and that we need to pay attention to, and especially the small ones before things get too serious, because it's much easier to reverse. If you've only got like a few little symptoms going on, you think, oh, something's slightly out of balance, and you try to bring your body back into balance, is going to be much quicker and easier than if you let something get a real foothold in the body.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, really giving yourself that kindness and love to reach out for support when you're seeing some of these signs and possible warning signals.
Yes.
Because I think, like you said, we push things aside and say that's normal, everybody has it. But in doing that, we're minimizing our own experience and actually lacking a bit of self-care by trying to just keep pushing forward. And so there's never any harm in reaching out, whether it's in groups, talking to coaches, talking to friends and saying, hey, do you experience this too?
Yeah.
And all of those things really help to break down some of that stigma that we had talked about earlier too, where one person shares and the other person says, oh yeah, I have that too.
Yes.
And they were feeling alone in it. You were feeling alone in it. And then you're able to connect and realize that neither one of you are truly alone. These are problems that are workable and solvable, and just a matter of finding the support, getting the tools to help you resolve the problem.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's just the problem of the symptoms themselves, because we all might be able to put a bit up with a bit of bloating or maybe a little bit of worry. But for me, it's like, are we living our life to our fullest? Are we here living up to our fullest potential? And when we have these things going on in the body, we're not, because we, for example, if we've got a lot of anxiety, we may not go for that promotion at work. Or if we have anxiety, I see it a lot with women, maybe around the house, like they're worried that the house is going to burn down. So they check every switch in the house and all that kind of thing. And that's what we're modeling to our children. And then they're picking up on that. So everything that we do has this massive ripple effect in our life. And so it's not just about ignoring or overlooking those small symptoms. It's about how else is it holding you back in your relationships, in your career, in your happiness of life.
Oh yes, I loved that you brought this up too, because those little things that we are pushing aside, trying to call normal, can build up over time. And yeah, before we realize it, we might not even notice that anxiety is keeping us from going for the promotion, or asking someone out on a date, or
Yes.
trying to do that thing that we really want to do, but we're just so stuck in our own anxiety that we don't actually do it. And so I think that some of these patterns can accumulate. Would you agree?
Definitely, yeah. We just get stuck in the same patterns, don't we?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And again, then we put it down to, this is just my personality.
Right.
So then it's a belief, and then a belief is harder to shift, right?
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be your personality if you don't want it to.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the thing. We all have this power to change the things that we want to change about ourselves. And maybe it's reducing some patterns of anxiety, incorporating more of these tools in your life so that you don't feel held back. You don't feel like you are not able to do what you truly want to do in your life. And when you feel like you're in that stuck and held back place, you are lacking fulfillment and, just feeling kind of unhappy, like you're settling all the time. And that's not a great place to be. We want more for you.
Yeah, and it can end up much darker places as well. So I work in collaboration with my sister, who has had her own mental health challenges. And unfortunately, at some point, it led to a suicide attempt because she didn't want to be a burden on anyone else. And so it can get to quite deep, dark places if we don't reach out for the support that really we need. And I think as humans, we like to help other people. If your friend comes to you and says, I need a hand with something, can you help me? We like to be helpful. We like to support others, right? And so, yeah, just encourage anyone who's kind of in that place to start some self-care practice if you can. And perhaps you're in a place that you can't, and that's just reaching out for support, be that your doctor, a friend, another professional, someone here in this group.
Absolutely, yes. And I know you have an event coming up around working with anxiety that could be a great place for someone to get started bringing some of these tools into their life. Would you like to share about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. I'm really excited. So it starts on Monday and it's called Anxious to Aligned. It's a 5-day challenge that we've run a number of times. So hundreds of women have gone through this now and kind of given us their feedback, and it's all been really positive. And so I mentioned my sister, her name's Sarah. And so Sarah and I teach these 5 holistic tools over 5 days. So I'll mention them briefly to you, but we touched on breath work, which is super important. And the reason I love that is it's so quick to change your state. You can literally change your state in 30 seconds with breath work. So like I said, it's free. You can do it anywhere. It's very, very accessible. The next one is the right kind of movement. So we touched on this earlier about not pushing yourself and creating more stress in the body, but finding a way to calm the nervous system down. Then I talk about nutrition. So going into a lot more detail about what are the kind of foods that you want to be avoiding and what are the quick wins that you can bring in. Like I mentioned, the chia seeds making you cheerful. What other foods can help your mental health? Then I'm going to come to that, the one I'm thinking about, the fourth one last, because I want to touch on it for a moment. Then we talk about mindset. So what is it? And I'm sure that you've done so much of this work, Courtney, but if we stay the same, we can't change. For us to change, we have to start doing something differently. And a lot of that growth comes from our mindset. So that might come from education, books, from podcasts, audio books, all of these lovely things. But we have a couple of excuses that hold us back. So one of them, for example, is I haven't got the time. So we kind of dive into, we've all felt like that about things before. So we kind of dive into some of the mindset things that are kind of keeping us stuck. And then the last one that I wanted to come back to right at the end, because this might be a little bit different for your audience, I'm not sure. But quite a few years ago, Sarah and I started to connect to the moon cycles. So I'm talking about here a full moon and a new moon. And women have done this for centuries. And the art of it has been lost quite a lot, actually. But it's a bit like connecting to nature in the seasons. So we've got the 4 seasons, obviously, and a lot of the time we might eat the same all year round, which is not that great for us. And it's kind of the same with the moon. The moon can affect the tides. And if it's powerful enough to affect the tides, it can affect us and our cellular bodies, so the water in our bodies. And what we found was around a full moon, and you might have heard of the word lunatic before, and maybe that crime goes up on a full moon, there is an effect on our bodies and the water in its cells. And it can make us a bit more impatient, aggravated, argumentative. Or for me in a full moon, when I started to tune into the cycles, I was in a lot more pain. So if I had back pain, it would be worse. If I had a problem with my shoulder, that problem would kind of be elevated, if you like. Excruciating pain I used to be in a lot on a full moon. So I realized the power of tuning into its cycles. So that's another thing. That's our 5th tool, is we talk about the power of letting go and releasing what's no longer serving us. We touched on earlier about some, you might be holding trauma in the body. That might be a really good time to try and release it. And a new moon is a lovely time to plant seeds of, what is it that I want to achieve in my life? So it might be, I want to try and drink more water over the next month. And when you come back to that a month later, you can say, well, what did I say last month? Oh yeah, it was about drinking more water. Did I do that? And if you didn't, it's not about beating yourself up, but it's about finding out, well, what got in the way? What stopped me? How could I make this easier? Maybe it's not water. Maybe it's coconut water that I need to drink more of, or whatever it is for you. So that's the last tool. And that one might be, I don't know if you've ever touched on that in your group before, but tuning into the moon, its cycles, and how it affects our emotions.
Yes, I don't do a lot with moon cycles, but I love the idea of setting a small goal for yourself and then visiting that just a short time later, about 4 weeks, where you can check in and see, how did this go? What can I change to do better? And it's a nice short time frame, so that it's not setting a New Year's resolution where you're looking an entire year ahead, but just a short bit of 4 weeks. And that feels a lot more manageable for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And each moon is linked to a different sign. And so one sign might be good for your career and another sign might be good for a relationship. So if you don't know what to set your intentions around, the moon kind of helps us work through them all over the 12 or 13 months. And so next week, Monday to Friday, we're explain a little bit more about each of these tools. And like I said, they're all easy, they're all enjoyable. This is one of the things that Sarah and I really loved as sisters. We wasn't as close years ago. I don't know, like most siblings, we fought when we were younger, and it's taken a while to come back together. And connecting with other women on the full moon and the new moon, so the moon cycles, has just really helped us have support and community. So they've been, like I say, easy and enjoyable tools to want to keep including into our lives. So we're running through that next week, and I'd love to extend the invite to any of your audience who would like to join us on that.
Thank you so much. We will be sure to put the link to the challenge in the comments here, so that people can sign up that directly and get ready to start on that on Monday. From anxious to aligned. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes.
And we're excited to have you back, Courtney. You're going to come and talk in our group, aren't you? A little bit more about processing emotions.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that. We'll have that chat in a few weeks.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it's been so nice to connect today.
Yes, you too. Thanks so much for joining us, Hannah.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.